Welcome to the third episode of the Skills Factory, talks and ideas about skills from Europe and beyond. This is the podcast series done by the European Training Foundation, European Union agency working on the topic of human capital development in the EU neighboring countries. In our first episode, we've discussed whether inclusive learning is a myth or a challenge. Our second episode was about the skills for the future. This time, we'd like to propose you another topic that is highly relevant to most of the learners globally. We'd like to talk about what to expect from the education in post-COVID world. Will online learning be the new normal? The education and training system was one of the most affected during the outbreak of COVID-19 in 2020. It is estimated, according to UNESCO, that schools closures affected about 70% of learners worldwide. Most of the education providers suddenly had to shift away from the classroom in many parts of the globe to an online learning environment. In a lot of transition and developing countries, this transition was slower or not possible at all. In some countries, online learning was fully implemented, but with a lot of questions and doubts about the quality and the results of such modality. We can't tell yet whether the adoption of online learning will continue to persist in post-pandemic reality and how such a shift would impact the education worldwide. But today, we'll try to look at the online learning from the perspective of efficiency, and we'll try to learn more about the point of view of future employers, and we'll try to answer the question whether online learning would be the new normal for education and training globally. I'm Maria Lvova, and today I'd like to introduce you our guests to talk about this topic. Today we're speaking with Michael Lightfoot, education expert. Hello, Michael.
Hi there.
And Albert Canigueral, expert on the future of work and digital platforms. Hi, Albert.
Hello.
So my first question will be to Michael. According to the recent study done by McKinsey, most teachers think online learning is a poor substitute of the traditional face-to-face classroom. What happened? During the global pandemic, obviously, there was no choice of going online or staying in the class. But after the health emergency is over, will online learning stay as an option?
Well, I think the COVID pandemic and the consequential school closures was an opportunity that we've been waiting to happen for a long time now, because teachers found there was really no alternative to communicating with the students than to do it online. So yes, we acknowledge that for the experience for many teachers and learners, it's been a suboptimal experience because they were so unused to doing it. But I think the last year has been a very steep learning curve, but a very successful one. And I mean, the consequences have been very varied, but at best, there has been a smooth transition into online. The problem is that, for the majority of learners, there have been issues to do with devices and connectivity. So, I mean, the pandemic has been an opportunity to bring all these issues to the fore, and policymakers now recognize what needs to happen behind the scenes to enable this new learning paradigm to become the new normal, as they say.
Yeah, exactly. We will come back to this new normal and to the future that we want to see for the learning process. Albert, online modalities are there not only for schools and university, but also for adult learners, for people that look for a job. Before 2020, it seemed that online learning courses like MOOCs or Coursera were considered by employers as less valuable somehow than the traditional ones. Do you think that after what happened to us in 2020, this perception of employers will change?
Yeah, I would say that it has already changed, because on 2020 we had urgent need to learn very fast on whatever media we have available to learn. No? We just not to think about our own digital skills before and after 2020. And a lot of people used to learn to use platforms like Zoom and other platforms through some kind of formal or informal online courses, MOOCs. So they prove to be highly scalable. and especially in these micro capsules, micro learnings for specific needs. I think what we also learn sometimes that just learning a super big topic without a very specific context or certain specific need might be not so engaging. But now during the pandemic, a lot of people had to learn a lot of things very fast, and they actually did. So we've demonstrated this lifelong learning paradigm and need. And again, in this scenario, and especially because we had basically no other option, but all these MOOCs and Coursera's and online training solutions proved to be efficient and highly scalable.
So do you think after this pandemic, when people will present a digital certificate or a badge now on social media, it will have the same value as the certificate done on a traditional course?
Yeah, why not? Especially in this kind of micro certification. That's another trend that we've been observing. Rather than having like a large curriculum, it's more about specific micro tools, micro abilities that you can learn, and we see more and more of that. And I agree that part of the certification, let's say, monopoly that schools, universities used to have as the only entities that were able to certificate certain skills, it's fading away.
And then maybe the value even of those courses on micro courses that you mentioned, delivered by a company, a digital company, will be even higher than the one we can get from the traditional provider of education, right?
Yeah, at least at the same level, and especially because another thing we are observing is that the skills that we need are changing very, very fast. As a company, as a person, as a student, a lot of, especially the hard skills, the specific knowledge, technical knowledge or tools knowledge are like there is a sentence from Alain de Haas, who is the Adecco Group's CEO, that he claimed that 40% of our skills are lost every 3 years. It means that in a decade, you are kind of obsolete in terms of technical and hard skills. So it's important to keep upgrading all the time with these micro learnings.
Yeah, and let's say, I think the fact that compulsory education went on online modality will also help then people to keep on learning after the compulsory education is over, but to keep on learning and developing, right?
Yeah, and we also see that more and more companies understand that in order to be competitive, they need to keep learning, not just producing. It's not about the competitiveness of our organization. It's so much about the pure output of what you are producing, but also your learning process and how learning oriented you are as an organization. And this dichotomy or this separation between a period where I'm learning and a period where I'm working, I think it's dangerous. We should be learning and working at the same time. And this is also a way to have more engaged workers or employees.
Yeah, in a way it's obsolete. No, thanks for COVID, it became this concept of first learning and then working became obsolete. But talking about the results of learning, Michael, do you think we'll see the results of teaching and learning in 2020 lower than in the previous years? Do you think that the way we educate our teachers would have to change?
Yes, I mean, I think it's for sure we need to educate our teachers differently. In terms of the results this year, it depends what you're measuring. If you're measuring performance against standardized testing regimes, I think it's very likely that because we've broken the paradigm, we've broken the mold, results could be lower if examinations indeed were allowed to go ahead. But of course, in many settings, they're not. In the UK and in many other parts of the world, examinations have been cancelled. So teacher assessments will take their place. And then there's the worry about what they call grade inflation. But I think the most important thing is in the development of skills and competencies that weren't measured previously, such as self-regulation, 21st century skills such as communication, collaboration, and so on. I mean, the development of those soft skills has taken place at a kind of exponential pace, and particularly self-regulated learning, something which was like an add-on previously, is now seen as to be a central disposition for lifelong learning. As we move towards learning which is lifelong, these learning to learn, metacognition skills are going to be much more important. And it's something that schools will need to focus on more strongly. And teacher education also needs to focus on this much more strongly. In the past, it's the learning to learn paradigm has been something which you do additionally when you've delivered your subject curriculum. I mean, now it's absolutely central to the process.
In fact, I wanted to ask Albert, how important it is for employers nowadays to get employees that know how to learn things and they are self-managers in the learning pathway.
No, it's critical. As I said, organizations acknowledge already that being a learning organization, and that means that your workers or employees are learning, and they have they are self-driven in order to learn whatever they need. This is a critical skill. And as Michael was saying, also all the softer skills, because at the end, more and more people are working on a project basis. So it means that your colleagues will be changing over time. Your context will be changing over time. So it's important that you are able to express yourself both orally and especially in written form, now that we are working a lot remotely and asynchronously. So it's important that we're able to explain what we are doing or what we aim to do in a very clear way, that we're able to provide feedback and to receive feedback and to listen. Skills that are not skills that are not usually part of the traditional curriculum, and they are proven to be critical for these organizations nowadays.
Michael, how difficult it is to assess if someone acquired this self-management in learning skills?
That's a really good question, and it brings me on to my other passion, which is digital portfolios. For so long, we've relied on proxies of student achievement or student understanding, i.e. examinations, where you put an artificial paradigm around what they're doing and you do a timed writing test for these people. We now have the capacity for students and learners of all ages to gather evidence of their achievement as they go along in a digital portfolio. And in that portfolio, just like an artist portfolio of the past, they can include examples of their collaboration. They can include videos, reflective journals. There's a whole range of evidence artifacts that can be gathered there, which actually demonstrate very strongly how well they are in terms of creativity, communication with each other, collaboration and critical thinking, problem solving, research skills, these sorts of things. There's tangible evidence there rather than just proxy examination results.
Albert.
I know that we see all that Michael is mentioning on the freelance space. No, for freelancers, it's less and less important to show a traditional curriculum for the potential employer. It's more important that you have your own website with your portfolio, yes, where you can showcase not what you know, but what you do or what you did with whatever you know and with whom. No, as Michael was pointing out.
Yeah, no, it's just one of our speakers in the previous podcast. He said also that one of the trends nowadays is to do the video curriculum, video CV, when you can actually prove not only that you can, use your camera on your phone, but you can also video edit, you can add special effects. And nowadays it seems that it's like a big trend. No, have you seen it?
Yes, for sure. In different, I mean, clearly in media studies and in those subject areas where it's been important, that's happened. But what's happening now is, the traditional CV is now a much richer document, can be a richer document. And indeed, I talk to students and say, think of your e-portfolio as your own website, and that's your showcase for yourself. And that will live with you, and you can build on it as you go along. And that's a much richer, much more representative, much more meaningful expression of you as a potential employee.
Albert, you wanted to add something?
I know just that there are some specific digital platform for blue-collar workers, especially on the retail stores or factories, mostly people who are customer-facing. They are completely based on video curriculum. It's 100% based on video curriculums, and it's usually very temporary jobs for young people. It's very often the entry to the job market for them, and it's been a success. It's like kind of Instagram 20-30-second videos where they can showcase their capacities to communicate and to be in a front desk.
So would it be correct to say that the CV of the future is not the one that lists your skills, but the one that lists the products that you can produce by your own hands, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a demonstration of those skills.
How will online learning continue to impact business? Albert?
We've seen that, as I was saying, organizations are looking for more entrepreneurial employees. This is the expectation, that people be more self-motivated and self-driven. And something I'm trying to explain while exploring the future of work, or the futures. It's important to have a plural when you talk about the futures of work, of works and workers, is to stop talking only about single individuals. Even when we are learning, we have a very individualistic approach to the learning process, and the same when we are employees. And I think part of the solution, or maybe a better circumstance, is when we group together with the small groups. It's better for learning. You do peer learning, you have a shared objective, a shared topic of knowledge that you want to learn. The same as a worker, or when you're trying to be an entrepreneur. Sometimes we're looking for these individualistic heroes that are going to solve the world, like Elon Musk, let's say, and there are not so many of them. So it's important that we actually create peer learning groups, peer working people. So that's what I'm doing as a freelancer. I belong to this, we call it a collective of freelancers. It's called We Share, we in French and Share in English. That we were founded in 2012. And everybody's a freelancer. We are self-employed. We don't have anyone on salaried basis. But we learn together, we work together. It's kind of my working tribe. And I think the learning and the entrepreneurial mode for the organizations need to shift the narrative from the pure individualistic approach to this small collective, a small tribes approach. I think that will help a lot.
Yeah, but at the same time, you will get in I don't know, in 5-10 years, you will get candidates that are used to sit in front of their computers for learning, and it's all about themselves in front of their computers. So do you see it as a potential problem? Because, in a way, online learning is very individualized. I mean, it's you and you're doing your part of the learning.
But you can. I was reading an article the other day about the skills from the gamers, the people who play video games, are highly desirable for the companies now, because they do a lot of, they have team spirit, they learn, they teach each other how to play better on video games. They do that remotely, but they still create a lot of trust in the distance. So no, I think, again, we have this idea, people are learning on their screens isolated, but I think we can have a different process where you learn with other people. Here, I would recommend, there's a person called Harold Jarche. I don't know how to pronounce that correctly. He has a methodology called the Personal Knowledge Mastery, PKM, if you want to search on internet. And he has this idea of how we learn better, always with peers at project level, at maybe, let's say, shared practice groups in an industry level. So I would really look into this.
Yes.
Do you think that teachers have to pay specific attention to developing those skills and making them work in groups?
Well, I think that what we found in the course of the last year, where most of the learning from schools has happened in a lockdown situation, is that there are three key elements to online learning. Learning is a social process, as Vygotsky told us all those years ago. And it really is. You learn better if you learn collectively and you're learning collaboratively. So to learn successfully, you need to have a sense of belonging. You need to be feel that we are part of something. Secondly, it needs to be the idea of a guiding hand, a teacher presence, an idea that you're presenting to something or some group. And thirdly, there needs to be collaboration. Now, if all those elements exist at whatever level, low tech, intermediate tech, or high tech, distance learning is effective. So collaboration is absolutely part of the process. And you know, what we've learned in the last year is online learning has actually jumped away from the individual on the computer screen, learning remotely and individualistically, to something which is much more interactive through Zoom and Teams that we've got to know day in, day out now. What we found, because of the emergency remote teaching scenario we faced back in March last year, is that so many ministries, and I, unfortunately, moving around different places. So I started off in Cambodia, spent most of my time during the lockdown in Lebanon, and now I'm in Turkey. So each of these education systems have instituted emergency remote teaching via, broadcast media, broadcast lessons, and so on. And in many cases, it's been a disaster because it's not interactive, it's not collaborative, it's very passive. And it reproduces all the things that are bad about classroom learning, which is, a passive learner and a transmissive teacher. Just as a learning paradigm in a classroom works best if it's interactive, if there's conversation taking place, dialogic learning, it's the same online. And we found many places to their cost that all these expenses of putting a camera in front of a teacher and a whiteboard and a teacher teaching has been absolutely wasted because nothing happens really. Some learners, a very tiny minority of learners, respond to that paradigm, but most learners want to have some form of conversation, some dialogue, some interaction with their peer learners and that sort of stuff. So I mean, we've learned a lot. And I think the critical thing we've learned is the need for interactivity and the understanding that just a transmissive MOOC doesn't do anything to anybody. It needs to be some degree of interaction, some sense of belonging, and so on.
Michael, would it be correct to say that in a lot of countries, teachers decided just to take normal curriculum, normal class structure, and put it online, and that's why it never worked, actually?
Well, I mean, there was an emergency. I mean, in the space of just a few weeks, there was international panic, and ministries of education, they mandated that. And so they found their best teachers and put them in their best studios and pointed cameras at them and said, teach, and that doesn't really work. But it was an emergency response to an emergency situation. But we did some focus groups in Jordan, for example, where they did this broadcast transmissive mode, and consistently the learners, the students, were saying that they wanted conversations, they wanted to ask questions, they wanted to get some interaction, and it's not possible. Many successful paradigms have been rediscovered as well as new ones invented, and I mean the homeschool link has always been a really critical feature of successful education systems, and now that again has been reinforced.
Once we will back to normal, face-to-face classes will be the main format of education, or blended format will be more widespread? And will education ever be the same in the post-COVID world?
Yes. Well, as we know, education is a deeply conservative sector, and teachers are quite reluctant to change. My colleague at London Knowledge Lab, Diana Laurillard, 10 years ago said, we're on the brink of an education revolution, but we seem to be on the brink for a very long time. What this pandemic has triggered is the move to online, but also the fact that teachers have found it to be very useful, very valuable, and a very enabling environment where they can actually spread their time more efficiently between different groups. So we heard about the flipped classroom a lot before the pandemic, but this notion of the majority of learners learning online, for example, in a lesson, increasing proportion of individuals recognizing the great value that comes from blended learning. So I think it'll be a semi-return to normal, but this is provided the impetus that I suppose digital online learning has needed for the past decade or more.
I will look at the remote work scenario. I'm coming from the future of work angle, and we see that the debates also at the beginning were, okay, let's go back to the office, no, back to the previous situation, and that seems to be unlikely at the moment. So people are looking for hybrid solutions with 3 days at home or somewhere else. Also, the idea of being at home. It's maybe not the correct. We have 30 spaces. I'm speaking with you from a co-working space, or it could be a hotel, in the same way that learning can only happen in the school building. It can happen anywhere. We can go to the cinema. We can go to a co-working. I've seen students in Spain, instead of following this broadcasting approach lesson from home, they join groups 3 or 4 in one of the students' building, or sometimes going to co-workings. So we'll see. And I think we can keep an eye on the remote work scenarios to have some ideas of what's going to happen in the learning space.
The future of work is much more hybrid now. It's much more work from home, work from the office, work in different spaces. And employers need to be confident that those individuals have the skills and capacity to drive themselves and not just have a cigarette and drink coffee and put their feet up,
That we will not be the same with our education system as it was. So the education system will not be the same as it was before COVID-19. It will be much more hybrid, but also it will be much more flexible in providing learners with skills needed. And the new learners will highly likely be more active on labor market and more get integrated into the labor market much easier. Can we conclude with that?
I think that's a great conclusion. Yes, absolutely. Yes. I agree with that completely. Yeah.
Albert.
No, I agree. You did a perfect wrap up of the conversation.
I would like to thank you for this podcast. We're nearly finished. So today we spoke with Michael Lightfoot, education expert. Michael, thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
And Albert Canigueral from Spain, who's expert in the future of work. Thanks a lot, Albert.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.